The Unbroken Place podcast with Eddie Paul Thomas is a production of Say Something Studios. In today's fast-moving world, thriving teams and ethical leadership are essential to business success. So how do entrepreneurs build spaces where people flourish while scaling up? At Elevate One Consulting, Dr. Erica Garcia Thomas and Eddie Paul Thomas are helping organizations grow with purpose. Blending evidence-based strategies, interactive training, and dynamic speaking, they equip leaders to boost engagement, transform culture, and drive results. From executive advising to brand revitalization, Elevate One delivers solutions that help your business do more than survive. It thrives. Visit elevateoneconsulting.com to get started. Elevate One Consulting. Innovate, grow, elevate. What if the clarity you've been searching for isn't out there, but already within you? I'm Eddie Paul Thomas, life and leadership coach. I work with purpose-driven people who are ready to lead boldly, live intentionally, and grow from the inside out. Whether you're at a crossroads or leveling up, coaching can help you move with confidence, wisdom, and impact. This is your time. Visit eddiepaulthomas.com to get started. Imagine a place where the untold stories of Black missionaries are amplified, honored, and celebrated. A place that bridges the legacy of the people of the way with the powerful missions work of today's African diaspora. Welcome to the Black Missions Museum, a digital project dedicated to preserving the voices, culture, and legacy of Black missionaries across the globe. But we need your help to bring this vision to life. Your support makes a difference. Join us in this mission by donating today. Just click the link in the show notes to give and be a part of history. Together, we can inspire future generations and keep the legacy alive. Welcome back to The Unbroken Place, where it begins and ends with empathy. I'm your host, Eddie Paul Thomas, author, life, and leadership coach, and we're back. I've read a lot of your emails and DMs and want to thank you for your prayers and well wishes. We took some time off not only to attend to a lot of my clients' new emerging needs, but to also attend to my family's needs in what has been such a challenging 2025. Know that if you're listening to this episode, I see you. I see how much it's taken for you to show up for others, how much of a struggle it's been to move in confidence in a time where there's so much uncertainty and pain all around us. Know that your efforts mean something to more than just yourself. In reading your notes, I've also learned more about your needs and what you find helpful. So going forward, if there are weeks where I don't have a guest, I will host micropods to discuss life, leadership, entrepreneurship, community, all the things that you've stated are important to you. With that said, we have a great episode today. We are fortunate to have my friend Erin Jones back on the program, and we are discussing the topic of allies versus abolitionists. The discussion began online after seeing a post by Abel Perry, who goes by Poetic Deconstruction on TikTok and Instagram, and we decided to bring the topic to the show. As we head into the holidays here in the States, there are really some genuine opportunities to have that hard discussion with relatives that you've been putting off for years. Erin and I share some stories and talk about the difference between allies and abolitionists and the cost of stepping up and stepping in. So let's get to it. Thank you so much for joining us again here, Erin. It's very rare that I get to have a guest, two times in a season. So I really appreciate you taking the time, especially for a topic like this. This is a deep one that everyone is dealing with. But I love your background and your thoughts on so many different things, but I'm really just glad you're here today.
I'm glad to be here. This is exciting. I'd love to talk about important things. So I
Yeah,
appreciate this
yeah,
opportunity.
absolutely. Well, today, folks, we are jumping into a really engaging topic, one in which no matter where you sit on the spectrum, it's something that impacts you, especially with everything that we are collectively dealing with in our current environment. And the idea is, what does it mean to be an ally versus an abolitionist? And what does it look like in the time that we are living right now? So I'll put you on the hot seat first, Erin, just in terms of your background, whether it be in education or even in just community with folks in the um, gosh, what are you? You're in the Pacific Northwest. Sorry.
Yes.
Um, where where do you fall on that line? Like, how do you define being an ally versus an abolitionist?
I'm going to give an example, a basketball analogy. You and I are
Ooh,
both former basketball players,
perfect.
so, uh, and it's wild. It's wild. I was thinking about your connection, our connection to Indiana and
Hmm.
to one of my favorite former students actually played college while you were at college, which is just kind of a wild, wild story.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, we are all connected. I say 2 degrees of separation, but I'm going to use a basketball analogy because this is something that I think people can picture. I have talked about ally versus accomplice in the context of a basketball game. An ally is somebody who's cheering my name from the stands. Go, Erin! You got this! You got this! And I'm out there setting screens, getting run into, breaking fingers, and they're out there yelling, "Get go, Erin! You got this! I got you, girl!" And they may
Hmm.
even have a water bottle to give me after the game,
Hmm.
and that's awesome. And I love that. Great. An accomplice is somebody who's gonna actually get on the court with me,
Mm.
and she's gonna be my teammate, and she's gonna set a screen for me, and she knows where I like to catch the ball. She knows how I move, so she's gonna look to pass me the ball, and she always gets it right where I want it. And that's an accomplice. An abolitionist is somebody who is, they may be on the court with me, practicing with me, but they're also going to go to the coach and say, "Hey, I saw how you talked to Erin yesterday.
Mm.
That was not okay.
Yeah.
That was not okay. Erin gets here before early for practice. She stays late, and she is not getting playtime. She deserves it over me." That's an abolitionist.
Yeah.
And I think it's abolitionist requires giving up privilege, it requires giving up power, it requires advocating for systems to change. And so I think a lot of people want to be allies. And a lot of people think that saying all the right things on social media is the stuff. And I think
Yeah.
oftentimes how people use social media is as an ally. I think there are some people that use social media as accomplices and they are saying the hard things and they're putting themselves on the line. But I think
Mhm.
being an abolitionist requires that you get to the root of systems and that you speak to those in power and that you do your work wherever you are in such a way that it disrupts systems.
Yeah. Yeah. I see. I love the way that you started with that analogy of basketball. There's so many different ways, and Erin and I can go nerd out over this completely over details just because of how much we loved and experienced the game. But I would agree. For me, an ally um, is someone who is for the team. When the event is going on, they're there.
Yep,
They're
they're
cheering.
there.
They're just 100%, wearing the colors, know the chants, know all the right things to
Yep,
say, and it's safe because they're, on the sidelines. And they can even scream at the other side, the other school that we're playing against, or the other organization we're playing against. But that's different than being an abolitionist in that you're on the court. You may not be the best player, but you're putting
right.
in the time. You're learning. You may not be a point guard, but you're like, hey, let me try and help out my point guard.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get the same benefits. I may not score all the points, but I'm a part of it. I'm in it. Um, and I think that is truly the biggest thing, because as I look at the spectrum of people who need abolitionists right now, if you're African American and having history pulled from museums, if you are a part of the LGBTQ AI plus community. I may not be a part of that community, but I can certainly advocate and educate and point people in the right direction, being an abolitionist in that respect. But I think the biggest thing for me when I see it is that I'm willing to sacrifice my comfort.
Yep.
It's one thing to say all the right things online, just like you were saying, know the right phrases, know the right hashtags. It's another to stand up and meet with the leaders of your church and talk to them about their views on the LGBTQ AI plus community. It's another to stand up in your school and say, no, I don't think we should be removing history, from, the honest, accounts of history from different groups. I just think it's a different level in which you do kind of risk that safety, that comfort, social standing. Oh my gosh, my community, they know me as that woke,
Yep.
whatever that term means this week.
Yeah. Yeah.
The absolute comfort of being able to just lay back, wave the flag versus being on the field.
And you can choose when to step in and when to step out as an ally, right? Like I think about
Yeah.
use basketball again. I've been in places where we had away games where there are very few people from our team supportive fans because it's a place that maybe they didn't feel safe. And so, I'm not going to go to that game because it's 2 hours away and those fans are kind
Yeah.
of raucous. So I'm not going to do that. And LA chooses when they step in and when they step out.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that when it comes to conversations about race or even gender and sexuality, there are so many people that are willing to get in the game when it is popular to get in the game, when it's a crowd. And I even think about this with the church in 2020 after George Floyd was murdered. And for those who didn't hear the last episode that I was on, I was born in St. Paul, Minnesota. My family still lives around Minneapolis area. And so for me, when George Floyd was murdered, there was a personal stake in that conversation. And I watched churches kind of jump on the bandwagon to talk about race when it was popular. It was in vogue. Well, within 2 months of his murder, it was not in vogue anymore. And the number of churches that stepped away from that conversation because it was no longer safe, because it was now a third rail issue. I think allies wear the jersey when it's comfortable to do so. And you can even be in enemy territory, but as long as there's a significant number of people wearing your jersey, it's still safe to say, we wear this jersey. But when it's just you, then it becomes more like an accomplice or an abolitionist. It gets closer to that. But I think too many allies only wear the jersey, only cheer from the sidelines when there's enough other allies and it doesn't
Yeah.
require anything of them.
Yeah, I think that's a completely valid point. And I look at it from a standpoint. I used to do a lot of consultant work in the Midwest with a lot of organizations, churches in particular. And that was a very difficult conversation when things would happen in the community. And I'm not talking about Black churches or Latino church. I'm talking about majority culture or majority white churches where something would happen traumatic in the community. And maybe it was impacting the Black community, Latino community, or maybe even women, who had experienced some sort of assault or something that was unjust. And the honest conversation that they would share with me was that they were concerned about the donor.
Yeah.
What would the donor say?
Yeah.
This is we're worried about this new wing of the church, and how do we get away with saying something that would be that donor would disapprove of? Is that something? I know that as you're working in education, is that something that you've experienced in the educational world?
Well, yeah, and I mean, I've also been a pastor's wife, so that like hit a
Mm,
chord for me. Um,
yeah.
and I think I wouldn't say that I've been on a deconstruction journey because I never left my faith, but I think I have had to adjust how I think about my faith because American Christianity, especially white evangelical Christianity, which is what my husband was a Black man in a predominantly white evangelical church. There are things about the American church that are very different from other places in the world. So even just the way that we give money to build these large buildings doesn't happen in any other part of the world anymore.
Hmm. Right.
And so
Right.
it is wild to me how like that then becomes the thing we're concerned about and not what's right.
Right.
We get so focused on the building, which is not actually the church. The
Hmm.
church is the work that happens in the building or outside of the building. But we've been so distracted by that we can't do the right work.
Hmm.
We're so distracted by having the new wing to
Yeah.
educate people or to have a women's event space that we're not actually willing to do the right work because people may not donate to the wing. I mean, it's just
Hmm.
all of that is a little wild. I think education for sure this is happening
Hmm.
in its own way. And it doesn't happen around the donor, it happens around school board and
Cool.
who's on the
Yeah.
school board,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so I love that in this last series of elections, no Moms for Liberty candidates won. I don't know if you knew that, but nobody, not one of
Oh,
their
that's
candidates
great.
won school board races.
Okay.
But I think about what that did to the last 4 years of school boards and schools is you had these people raised up who really didn't care about schools. They cared about a particular political platform. They
Hmm.
cared about particular issues. And
Yeah.
I have no problem with conservative people being on school boards. I think we need people from every political affiliation. We need people in community. So in every community, there are going to be people with different perspectives. I think that's really critical on a school board. But
Hmm.
this was nefarious and this was not in good faith. And
Yeah.
there were people being raised up with lots of dollars who were not even needing to campaign. They were just all the money was buying
Mm.
people's votes
Gotcha.
to get into office to shift things in schools and to shut down departments in schools and to shut down policy in schools.
Yeah.
And that to me is bad faith. And that's where I saw a lot of that similar to churches is superintendents really afraid to do certain work
Hmm.
because a school director or a series of school directors would, I mean, I don't know if people know this, but the superintendent is not the ruler of the district, the school board is. So
Right.
the superintendent answers, and a lot of people don't know that. They think the superintendent is in charge. No, the school board is in charge,
Yeah.
and the school board decides whether that person keeps their job. Much like an elder board at a church, the pastor, for the most part, is not supposed to be in charge of the. Anyway,
Right.
that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
school boards really run schools, and I think a lot of people are not aware. This is also, as an aside, you should run for school board. Anybody out there who really cares about schools, run
Yeah.
for school board. School
Hmm.
boards, I believe, have much more impact on our community than people give them credit for. They
Hmm.
decide who the next generation will be, what kinds of education they will have, what histories they'll be exposed to, which identities get to be talked about and which not. And so I see school board is that parallel structure to what you were talking about with money in churches.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. I think when we're looking at this from the perspective of community, and you and I have talked online a lot about this, the hyper individualism that we experience in this country comes at a cost.
Does
That sometimes we just don't know how to interact in community. That people get wrapped up so much in their ideology, their individual ideology, that the what's in it for me, that
yeah,
it's hard to see, hey, you know this is really going to impact our community if we continue to act this way, vote this way, behave this way with one another. And I think that you know, I don't speak to politics in terms of, well, this is how you should vote and da, da, da. I don't go into a
Right.
lot of that personally on this platform. But politics literally means of the people, and so it's interwoven to everything, into everything that we do. And so as I look at this, there are a lot of people who are in a space of realizing, oh, wow, maybe I should have considered the
Yeah.
needs of others when I was voting this past
Yeah.
term.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever your beliefs are, um, we're all suffering now.
Yeah. I talk often about when I ran for state superintendent in 2016. I
Mhm.
would run into lots of people who were older, who didn't have children in school. Maybe they didn't have
Yeah,
children at all.
yeah,
And they would say to me, well, I don't have kids in school. Why should I care?
yeah,
But because the kids in your community are going to one day be taking care of you at the nursing home, or they're going to be your doctors, lawyers, business owners. And so, again, that independent spirit
hmm,
kills us. It really
yeah,
kills us because we don't realize that we are all intimately connected to one another. And I'll use healthcare just because it is a political football right now.
yeah, yeah.
Healthcare and food, those two things. I just, in all transparency to folks, I grew up in the Netherlands. It is a socially democratic country. We elect our officials. There is a prime minister, there's a parliament, but there's a lot of social programs. And so I came to the United States as a college student. My normal was that houselessness is not a thing. My normal was everyone gets educated. My normal was everybody has food, everybody has a livable wage, moms and dads get paid time off. That was just my normal. And when I came to the United States, I found it so wild that a country so rich had so many unhoused people, that a country so wealthy had so many people waiting in lines for food, that, and then to watch this last year, people who call themselves Christians
Mm,
celebrate the taking away of resources from our poorest, our most disabled. I think what has really been hard for me to watch is it's almost like in the US, you have to prove that you deserve to be cared for. But these are our brothers and sisters.
yeah,
And the reality is, when we don't care for a person's health care, so let's say somebody doesn't have health care because they can't afford to pay for it. And we say, if you don't have a good job that gets health care, then maybe you don't deserve it. Well, here's what happens. And I know this because I just spent 5 months in a rehab facility with my dad. People who don't have health care then end up in emergency rooms.
yeah,
And doctors and hospitals have to spend 10 times as much to take care of that need that person has, because they have to, by law, take care of people who are in emergency rooms.
right.
When if we just invested in everyone, we actually would save our country so much by investing in everyone's healthcare, so that people aren't only coming to urgent cares and emergency rooms when they're in crisis. We could get on the front side. But the United States doesn't like investing. You almost have to prove that you are failing enough or hurting enough or struggling enough to get help. Instead of,
Hmm.
in the Netherlands, what happened is they said, okay, in order for people to survive, this is what everybody needs. This is the baseline of what one needs to survive. Let's make sure everybody has that. Then whatever else you want to do, like you want to work harder, you want to work more hours, do that. If you want to stay at home, be a stay-at-home mom, do that. But everybody has a baseline. And in the US, we almost celebrate the people who are working 80 hours and 90 hours a week.
Oh,
We celebrate
yeah,
the wealthy, and then we turn everyone against the poor. But we haven't invested in the poor. And we say they just haven't worked hard. Whenever someone says those people don't work hard enough, I will send you into any urban center to watch the auntie on the corner trying to sell fruit, or whatever she's trying to sell. And she's working 70, 80 hours a week on the corner trying to sell her stuff. People are working 3 and 4 jobs. Like, I spent my whole teaching career in our poorest schools in the United States, from Philly to South Bend, Indiana, to Columbus, Ohio, to Tacoma, Washington. All of my families, for the most part, 90% of my families were working 2 and 3 and 4 jobs, and none of them provided benefits. So none of my students had benefits, and they came to school with rotting teeth. Guess what? You can't learn when you have rotting teeth.
Yeah.
You can't learn when you're sick. And so now the education system's now having to hold those kids and make sure we have snacks in our drawers. So the teachers who are not getting paid well are also spending thousands of dollars to make sure they have snacks in the classroom so that the babies can eat, so that they can learn. I mean, it's all of this stuff that we have enough money in this country. If we were willing to share, we could all benefit and everyone could start from here.
Yeah.
But we fight against that because it's all about me. But you're being so consumed with you is actually hurting that person down the street.
I think there are two things that come to mind from your example, and it's I love when you start with your stories, because they always make me start thinking about something. And I go super nerd because I'm a historian. I will tell stories for days and help people link what happened then to what's going on now. So the two things that come to mind. Number one, I think of Pastor, what is his name? Martin Niemöller, the man who wrote the First They Came, and he was talking about all the different people that he didn't stand up for, and then finally they came for me, and there was no one to stand up for me. As we look at these situations that we're dealing with as a people, you cannot anymore claim ignorance to what's going on to our Latino brothers and sisters.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot pretend as if you don't know what's going on with the LGBTQAI plus community. You cannot pretend that you don't know what's going on and why so many people are leaving the church. Like, why is that? You can't pretend, because it's not about going to the library. It's not about reading the newspaper front to back. It's right in your hand.
It's right in your hand.
Day.
Yep.
And so the feigned ignorance isn't working. And I think that, if you just kind of listen to the rhythm, you put your finger on the pulse of what's going on in so many communities, there's a lot of mea culpa. There's a lot of, okay, yeah, we screwed up, and people are trying to figure out how to bring them back into the fold. And honestly, I understand why so many communities are like, no, stay away from me. I don't want you. You weren't here when I was being persecuted. Don't pretend like you care now. It's because you're getting hurt. And there's a lot of that going on. But I think that as we push through that discomfort of bringing back our family members that have hurt us, and trying to figure out a path forward, some of that honestly comes to understanding how we got here. And I don't know. I'm obviously, you grew up in the Netherlands. I have no idea what your historical takes are about the U.S. But one of the things that you mentioned about healthcare, why we should have universal healthcare, and why are we one of the last to have it, being one of the richest in the world? What's going on? That doesn't make sense. Well, historically, folks, I just want you to know, in the 1940s, okay, we had this president named Harry Truman, who had this big bill about helping us all have universal health care. We would have been among one of the first to do it and pull it off. Guess what came into play in the 1940s? Why they said no to everyone getting health care? It meant that Black people would also have to have universal health care. It meant that they would have to desegregate hospitals and schools and so many things that erased the myth of white supremacy.
Did you know about the study that came out in 1912, the book that was written by the German immigrant and I'm blanking on his name right now, but he immigrated to the United States in the late 1800s. But in 1912, he wrote a document, and what it said is that if we just let Black people go without health care for 3 generations, they will die out.
Yeah.
And that was one of the studies that they used when they tried to defend not giving everyone health care in Congress in the 40s.
Mm-hmm. That was a part of it. And then as you look at, again, just kind of staying on healthcare, looking at where the women's rights are right now when it comes to bodily autonomy, the majority of that, and again, this is just historical, folks. There's a book out there. I cannot remember the gentleman's name. Ben Wattenberg, I believe, is the name, called The Birth Dearth. And they started the scare of there not being enough white births. So we've got to end this abortion thing. They can't have abortions because that means there's not enough white babies being born. Again, race coming in and messing things up for everyone, and just muddying the waters when we could have had all of these things and been so much healthier in community with one another. So I think there are a lot of things that we can learn from the past if we look at them honestly and understand that, hey, we keep making the same mistake, but we have to be honest about what the mistake actually is.
Mm-hmm. We need to be willing to have the hard conversations. A lot of people hear these things and they say, oh, why is it always about race?
Mm-hmm.
Because it always is. Race is always in there somewhere. There's always this thread of race in there. And what Americans have been taught is we don't talk about race, though. We don't talk about race in mixed company. And so there are so many white folks, if you're watching as a white person, I want to just invite you to, we need to talk about race. And for those of you who, we don't talk about race in polite company, you're never going to get good at a thing you don't work at. And another basketball analogy, I became great at basketball not because I showed up at practice every day, but because on the off season I was on a court shooting free throws, 50 free throws every day on the off season. That's race. If you want to get good at talking, it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable, and nothing comes easy. You have got to be willing to wade in and be uncomfortable. And to my Black brothers and sisters, we also have to have grace for people who are getting into the game and getting bloody and saying the wrong thing, and they've been misinformed. And we have to have grace and be willing to hold people and call them in. We got to be willing to call people in, because this is the other thing I see is I have seen white folks who want to get in and they want to understand, and they say the wrong thing, or they do the wrong thing, or they say the right thing but at the wrong time, and then we just blast them. And guess what? Just like any kid in a classroom, if you shame them in front of their peers, they are not coming back. They're not coming back. And so it's this delicate dance of, we need you in the game. We need you in the game. And we got to be able to correct you, but we have to correct people with love as well. We have to be willing to say, hey, when you said this that way, I know what your intention was, but here's how we received it. Here's how that felt. Here's a better way to say or do that thing. We got to be willing to call people in and not shame them.
I'm going to take yours and I'm going to run with my own basketball story now. When I played in high school, I had a teammate. I'm not going to name him right now, but I had a teammate who was a ferocious rebounder. I mean, the guy was only like 6'4", 6'5", but rebounded like a 6'10", 6'11" guy. Just a beast on the boards. But his layups were problematic. Like his ability to shoot the layup very quickly with defense coming, he would just freeze up and it would be a thing. So I knew that when I would drive and draw the defense towards me, if I dropped that pass off to him, there was a good chance, less than 50%, that it was going to go dink, but he'd get the rebound and we'd get another shot. But I kept giving him the opportunities, and eventually towards the end of that season, I could count on him because he had put in the work, and I'd given him the opportunity to make those mistakes in high pressure moments. And so I tell this story because, again, back when, people were interested in DEI as a conversation, it had mostly to do with not just telling, hey, majority culture, here are your mistakes and here's how you get better. It was also letting those who are in the minority, so to speak, understand that they have to make mistakes. Putting in the work is missing the layup.
Yeah.
Time and time again until you
But it's
figure out
taking
your technique. And you have to be in high pressure situations where you say the wrong thing over and over again until you say, learn from it and change your technique. And you, as a member of the LGBTQAI plus or minority class in this country, have to embrace the fact that this person is trying to put in the work. They're reading the right books. They're attending the right conferences. They're having the tough discussions, not just out in public, but at home with Uncle Bob and Aunt Susie, who are saying the wrong things, and they're standing on their own trying to deal with this. And you have to recognize in those situations that there's nothing comfortable about race, because it has been this bugaboo from the very beginning. So as I look at this, I would love to see your thoughts or hear your thoughts, Erin, on what you think the cost of becoming not just an ally, but transitioning or growing into an abolitionist would be for our brothers and sisters.
I mean, I think the cost is great. And I would offer, having watched this country, I'm going to say devolve. And I am not anti-Republican, but this version of Republican to me is the opposite of what I believe the Conservative Party was when I first came to the United States. And so this is a different version of the Republican Party than I recognized. But I would say to folks that our country is going to suffer either way. So we are all losing something. And you get to choose, are you going to lose something working towards the right thing, or are you going to lose something staying silent? And that's the cost right now. We are all going to pay a price.
Yeah.
Come January, with all the healthcare cuts and the cuts in support and all of just the cuts that have come across the board, we are all suffering now, but there is greater suffering coming. And you can either invest now in practices and strategies and conversations that will cause us to win for justice later, or you can just stay silent. And the ship is going down. The ship is going down. And I think there are too many people that think, well, if I just stay out of it, it'll right itself at some point. It's not going to right itself. I mean, I lived in Europe. I lived in Europe after World War II. I do not have a Dutch friend who did not lose people to the Nazi regime. In fact, if you've ever heard of Corrie ten Boom, the elder at my church, one of our head elders was her secretary. And so we got to hear stories about Corrie ten Boom every year. And I think about all the history that I learned about the Nazi Party, and they came out of nowhere, presumably, from people. But anyone in Europe can tell you what it looked like in the beginning, and the numbers of people that stayed silent. We cannot afford to stay silent right now. And I'm not saying that this will turn into Nazi Germany, but I am saying there are things that are happening right now that are running parallel to, I believe, the 30s and 40s in Europe that are incredibly dangerous. And we will all suffer. Again, all of my Dutch friends, it didn't matter who they were, it didn't matter whether they were Jewish or not, all of them have stories of suffering in their family because of what happened in Germany and in the Netherlands and just across the west of Europe in the 40s. So we can be part of the solution or part of the problem, but there will be suffering for everyone. There's a cost for all of us. What are you willing to pay?
Yeah. I wouldn't disagree with anything that you said. I think, in fact, adding to it, there is a lot of freedom once you embrace the truth. And, I think about any situation when I'm coaching people or consulting for an organization, it usually revolves around a really simple truth. What broken thing gets fixed without acknowledging that it's broken? If you are sick, you pretending like you're sick, not sick, doesn't change the fact that you're coughing or have diarrhea or whatever is going on with your body. You dealing with a job environment that's toxic, you just pretending, oh, this isn't as bad as it is, as it really is. That doesn't change the work environment. So being honest about where we are as people is the starting point. Being honest. One of the questions I ask, and we'll go back to race here. One of the opening questions I usually ask when I used to consult on DEI was, why do you call yourself white? Not as a challenge, like to beat them up or, think about the history of no, think about that. You are Italian, you are Irish, you are, insert the country of origin. Why do you call yourself white? And then we're able to break down the racial caste system and why are you upholding that as opposed to holding on to your family lineage and values and hit, cultural norms of your family. But having truthful conversations about where we are, not your political party or your ideology or what my dad said. None of that stuff is our true experience, but having the honesty in those moments to say, no, you're talking about Black people, but you haven't been to a Black church, a Black barbershop, a Black school, a Black anything. Yet you've got all these opinions. Like if I were to sit here and tell you, well, Chinese people X, Y, and Z, and I haven't been anywhere near a Chinese community, what am I saying?
Yeah.
It's not honest. It's not genuine.
And that's really why the answer for me always is about relationship.
Yeah.
So if you have
Amen.
attitudes about a particular group outside of relationship, those attitudes don't make sense. And
Mm-hmm.
so I challenge leaders always to think about who's in your circle. Who are the
Yeah.
people that you interact with? Who are you interacting with on social media? Are they all people like you? Do they believe the same? Do they look the same? Do they talk the same as you? Do they live in a similar environment?
Yeah.
As a leader, you have a responsibility to serve a diverse group of people. So who do you not know? And I'll just be really transparent. When I ran for state superintendent, I had no relationship with the trans community. I had students who were bisexual,
Mm-hmm.
lesbian, gay. I
Yeah.
never had a trans student.
Yeah.
And I got called out on some things that I said. And I didn't say it out of maliciousness at all. I said it out of ignorance. And
Yeah.
I pushed into that community. And now I have two trans students that are part of my life every week. They're part of my classroom
That's
every week.
brilliant.
And that relationship has shifted how I see all trans people. Not that trans people are a monolith. I know that because I have two trans students in my class who are very different people. But
Mm-hmm.
it has opened my eyes to realize, oh, okay, same is true when you live in Indiana. There's Black and there's white. There's not a lot of Asian people, depending on where you live. There's not a lot of Latino people. But out here where I am now, there's people from all over the world. There's people from
Yeah.
Venezuela, Honduras, the continent of Africa. So moving out here, I suddenly was exposed to lots of Korean people and Vietnamese people,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly once you have stories, like actual stories, you can tell it people that you know their names and you know their stories. It changes how you see people, and so I would encourage folks, if you know that your circle is all one thing, step outside of that circle and get
Yeah.
to know some people. Take
Absolutely.
somebody out for coffee if you really are about this business. Pay
Yeah.
for somebody's coffee once a month and just sit at a table across from them and listen to their story. There's something really powerful that happens when you hear the story of someone who's really different from you, and now there's a name and a face and a real life.
Yeah. I think just to kind of offer my answer to the actual question. We've been all over the place since dropping that question. That's my bad. What does it actually cost to be an abolitionist? I'll give you my perspective on it. Back in the Midwest, we had a church that for 120 years of its existence, it never had a stance on gay marriage or anything like this. All of a sudden, 2016, boom, it drops this bomb and says, well, in order to be a member of this church, you have to believe that marriage is between one man and one woman. Never existed before in the history of the church. And I didn't just, slam my fist on the table and say, nope, I'm not standing for this and leave. I spoke to the leadership of this church.
Yeah.
I had a meeting with three heads of the church, and I said, look, I'm thinking about my community, these people I love, and you're telling me that if somebody's child is raised in this church for 15, 16 years, they've accepted Christ, they've done all the things, they know the community, they know all the songs, they've been to all the benefits, they do everything in this church. And then at some point when they're 18, 19, 20, they realize, I'm a woman and I'm interested in another woman. Or I'm a man and I'm interested in another man. They instantly lose membership. A lifetime bound up in the fabric of this church, and they lose membership. And their excuses were all over the place in terms of, in the Bible it says, I said, well, in the Bible it says a lot of things, and we can talk about slavery. We can talk about what Lot did to his daughters. We talk about a lot of things in the Bible. But you're choosing to do this thing that's never existed before in the church to specifically target
a particular community.
And it doesn't make sense why. And I wasn't even involved that much in that community. I saw that was an injustice. And after the conversation, the only way that they would come back in terms of, well, we'll massage it a little bit. You can come to our church. You just can't officially be a member. That was their compromise. And so for me, it did not directly impact me.
Right.
But I said, I can't be a part of this.
Yeah.
And I had to find another church. And so I stood in the discomfort there.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I would invite people to do and to really think about here, because there are those who are like, hey, I hate to keep picking on Uncle Bob and Aunt Sue, but my Uncle Bob is super racist, or my Aunt Sue is super sexist, or whatever. I'm cutting them off. They're not invited to my home. Well, think about it from this perspective. You are the one who can have the most impact on them.
Yeah.
Cutting them off does nothing for the other people, the marginalized people who are dealing with their crap, so to speak.
Yeah.
You're the one who has the most influence and can educate and can spend time with them, knows their phone number, knows where they live, knows what their habits, could even incorporate the rest of your family into helping them, reshape. But cutting people out, if you're part of the majority culture,
right,
helps no one. Saying, oh, I don't want to deal with the stress of their racism. Well, that's the discomfort we're talking about. That's the cost that we're talking about. When it's one thing to be an ally and put the flag in your yard, but then to say, oh, Uncle Bob can't come, that's the abolitionist that says, come on in, Uncle Bob. Let's have
back to so you talked about race and you talked about allyship, and I know you've already said a version of this, but this just strikes me again that because of how we have identified color, so I see someone, I identify. What's funny is I used to look like Kamala Harris, so I had the exact same haircut as Kamala Harris. And people were not sure what race I was. So they would ask all the time, "What are you?"
Yep.
Now that my hair is in its natural state, nobody ever asks again. So I don't get to walk in spaces and be ambiguous anymore.
Yeah.
I walk in spaces and everybody knows. And I love that I'm a Black woman. I love that God put me in this body and this skin and this hair. I love that. But what's interesting is I don't get to shed that ever. And what I tell my white friends is you get to move through spaces and choose to think about race or not. I don't get to choose. With every interaction, every time I walk into a store, every time I walk into a new business where people don't know me, I have to think about my skin color. And this is something that white folks don't have to think about. And I'll use my parents as an example here. I was adopted by two white people and from Minnesota, northern Minnesota. Never seen a Black person before they adopted me. And their whole world has changed now because they also now can't not see race. Because they've realized that for them, when they're alone without me, they can move through the world without thinking about it. But as soon as I'm in the picture, there's a different way that we have to move as a family. And we have learned this. And so just to use another real story, my parents moved into a retirement home 2 weeks ago, a retirement community. So they have an apartment and a big apartment complex of folks who are retired because my dad fell and broke his hip, and literally their house went on the market yesterday, which is incredibly tragic, but they can't take care of a big house with my dad unable to walk very well.
Yeah.
And so they're in this retirement community. Well, what we know for us, they're two white people. I'm a Black woman. Everywhere we go, I don't call them by their names. I say, "Hey, mom and dad." And I say it really loudly. "Hey, mom and dad, I'm going to head out to the car." And my mom will say, "Okay, daughter." And it's signaling to everyone we are connected.
Yeah.
Because the assumption always is I'm the caregiver because I'm Black and I'm with the white family.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay.
All the time. In the first few days in this retirement home, as I was leaving each day, the front desk person would say, "Hope you had a great day at work." And I'm like, I was not working. This is my parents. But I say all that to say this. When my parents and I are in public, my parents are very aware of how they move and how I do. So when I ran for state superintendent, my dad insisted on being my driver on the east side of our state. So in the state of Washington, it is divided by a mountain range. On the west side is where most of the people of color live. On the east side, even though there are migrant laborers in certain parts, there are not a lot of Black folks on the east side of our state. And my dad insisted to be the white guy driving Erin around when I ran for office. And what my parents learned is when we stayed in a hotel at night, my mom, the white lady, would go in and get the rooms, and then I would come in about 5 minutes later. Because my mom always got a better room than I did.
Yeah.
And that's where my parents got to see real time with me as a grown person, just the different ways that we get treated. Often when we went into restaurants, the waiter would avoid me and get my parents' food and sometimes just not even talk to me at all. It's just interesting, those dynamics. And so back to ally and accomplice. For an accomplice, I think about my mom who will speak up and say, "Hey, you did not take care of my daughter."
Yeah.
And here's what my mom has said. My mom, there's a story that I wrote about in my book. My parents lived in Europe until 16 years ago, and I had just become the assistant state superintendent. I was doing my very first keynote speech in Eastern Washington, and my mom asked if she could come with me. And she'd never heard me do a keynote. And we get to the location, and I have a beautiful suit on, and my mom is wearing khakis and a white blouse. I still can picture her. And my mom is this 5 foot tall, pale white lady. And the director of this conference walks straight to my mom and says, "Oh, you must be the assistant superintendent, Erin Jones." And my mom, I have never seen my mom so angry in my entire life. And she points up to me and she says, "No, my daughter is the assistant state superintendent. She's your keynote speaker." And she grabs my keys out of my hands and she leaves. And the director of this conference, this is my first keynote. The director of the conference does not apologize to me. She brings me back to the green room and I have to do my keynote speech, and I do my keynote, and I'm terrified at this point. Like, this is my first keynote, and this is how I'm being treated. I am terrified to do this keynote, and I get a standing ovation. It's this really great response, and I'm feeling great. And I look out into the audience, and my mom is not there. And I get out to the lobby, and she's not there. And I go out to the car, and my mom is sitting in the car sobbing. And I have never seen my mom cry. My mother does not cry in public. And here's what she says to me. She said, Erin, you've told me stories for 20 years. I lived in America for 20 years without my parents. She said, you've told me stories for 20 years about how you get treated and how you're invisible. She said, I never understood that. You're 6 feet tall. I never understood how you could be invisible until today. And here's the powerful thing she said. And if you were not my daughter, maybe I never would have noticed either. But you're my daughter. And it goes back to that relationship piece. When you have blood and sweat, just like being on a basketball team, there is a different way you show up for your teammate. Even if you don't like your teammate as a person, there's a different way that we show up for our teammates when we have sweat and blood. We've run lines together. We've run double days together. There's a different way that we show up for our teammates in public because we have sweat together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And that's, I guess that's what I'm inviting. If you want to be an abolitionist, it actually requires that you get out and sweat with us also, so that you're not speaking about us, but you're speaking with us and on behalf of us. You cannot speak for us if you've just read about us.
Right.
If you've read a bunch of books about us, but you have zero relationship, I don't want you out there advocating for me.
Right.
So it requires relationship. So I trust my white parents to advocate for me because they are in relationship with me. They have bled and sweat and walked 54 years of life with me and heard all the crap that they've heard from their families about me. So I trust my parents to advocate for me. I don't trust people that have just seen me out in public.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, gosh, we could probably swap 3 hours of stories. Just Erin, yeah. One comes to mind, but I think I'll save that for this question. How can someone honestly assess where they stand as an ally versus an abolitionist? And you kind of unpacked it a little bit, but go deeper. Like, for the people who are listening or watching this on YouTube, how can they assess where they honestly stand?
I mean, I think it goes back to relationship. I want you to, okay, I'll use kind of a funny, sick example. There are a whole bunch of people who are Donald Trump allies, and they got all his paraphernalia, but they've never met him. This doesn't make any sense to me. It makes zero sense to me. They've never met him, but they got all the gear. They got all the swag. They're out in the streets. Yay! But they never even met the man. And they're willing to give their lives for this guy they don't even know.
Right.
Which is wild to me. It's wild to me.
Yeah.
So here's what I would say to you. If you are an ally, you probably don't have strong relationship with the people you say you're an ally for. So get into relationship. And just start showing up in spaces where those people are. So here's what I tell leaders all the time. If you say you care about the Black community, show up in an NAACP meeting. Attend a Black church. Just show up where people are. And don't show up and say to people, hey, I'm just coming to get to know the Black community. Don't do that. Don't do that. But just show up and sit and listen. And here's what I know to be true because I have watched white people do this. When you go into a Black space, and I'm going to use the Black community as an example, people will ask over time, hey, I see this is the second time you've been here. Tell me, who are you? Who are you? And what is your interest in here? And then you can share with people. But just show up in spaces and just get to know what are people really caring about. And even an initial step before that, I want you to look at your social media. Who are you following? And if you are only following people who look like you, sound like you, believe like you, vote like you, I want to challenge you today to start following some people who don't look like you, who don't vote like you, who don't sound like you, and just start paying attention to what do they care about? What are the things that are coming up in their feed all the time? What are the things they're crying about? What are the things they are upset about, concerned about, passionate about, excited about?
Yeah.
Just start watching first and then figure out what are the organizations in your community where you could just go up and just serve, just go to serve and use that as an opportunity to investigate, be an investigator and just begin to watch. How do people engage? Who's in charge here? How do people use their voices here? How do
Yeah.
people engage across generational lines? Just start watching. What are the rules of the game in this community? And just spend a lot of time watching. Here's the thing for all of us who are not white, we are experts in white folks. We have to be.
Yeah.
Because we had white teachers and we've had white doctors and we've had white folks around us our whole lives. We are experts in y'all.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be experts in us. But I would encourage, if you want to be an accomplice, you better get expert in us.
Yeah.
Because until you're expert in us, you can't speak for us. And know that we're not a monolith. We are different. You know, I love that I have lived across the country. I've lived on the East Coast. I've lived in the Midwest. I've lived on the West Coast. I spend a lot of time in California. We are not a monolith. So don't assume that because you know one Black person, you know all Black people.
Mm-hmm.
Don't assume that because you know one person who identifies as LGBTQIA that you know everybody. But start with one. Start with one. And
Yeah.
see what does that one lead you to.
Yeah.
And just spend some time invested in getting to know people. It's all about relationship. And once you're in relationship, then let people tell you how you can help. Don't you decide, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go fight for this thing. Because it may not be the thing that people need right now. So ask. Also,
Yeah.
I believe that when you're outside of a community, the best way to advocate for people in that community is to ask them, how can I be of service to you?
Yeah.
How can I best serve you with the talents and skills and voice and platform that I have?
Yeah. Yeah. Just on one note on one thing that you said, Erin, very important. Understand that, you know, if you are a man showing up for women, you know, and you know, women's rights and in that community, or if you are white showing up to support Black people in their community, understand that when you walk through the door, they're going to be very curious. They're going to
Yep.
ask questions, not because you've offended them, but literally because it's a survival mechanism that we have developed.
Safety.
It is a safety thing. Like, okay, I'm at the NAACP meeting here in Charlotte, and a white man walks in. I'm going to ask you a question or two, like,
Yep.
hey, you know, how you
Don't get
doing? Where are you
defensive.
from? Tell me about yourself. It literally has nothing to do with you because I don't know you, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't seem like you've been a part of this community. I want to make sure that you're safe for this community. Just
Yep.
like if I were a man walking in to one of the hardest things I've ever done in the Midwest was walk in because I was an advocate for women's rights, specifically when it comes to assault and you know, protecting women.
Yep.
You walk into that room full of women as a man, you're going to get some looks, you're going to get some questions. Do
Yep.
you know anyone here? No, I was invited by so and so, and you know, I'm trying to be an advocate as a social worker, as a caseworker. Okay, we feel more safe with you here. So just understand, regardless of where you're trying to advocate, if you haven't normally been there, you're gonna get some questions in the beginning, and those are justified
Yep.
questions. So just, you know, be prepared for that when you're acting on what Erin was saying. Um, in in terms of my response to how someone could honestly assess where they are, I think it's two things. Number one, um, there's a somatic response that we get when we are uncomfortable. We can feel it. You know what I mean? When someone brings up the topic of race or LGBTQ or women's rights, or you know, name the topic, and your first response was, ooh, like you get defensive, or ooh, I don't want to talk about this. Acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very real thing. That's a very real thing. And so if you can say when these topics come up and your response is automatically, I'm going to retract, or ooh, I'm defensive, that that's a good cue that you're not where you need to be when it comes to advocating for one of those communities. That's number one. Number two, how you respond in those segments. And I'm not talking about the initial somatic response, but what do you do or say when those topics come up? Do you stay where it's safe? Do you say, ooh, if I say this, my neighbor may not like me so much. If I do this, ooh, it may cost me that promotion. If your immediate response is, well, what's in it for me? How can I protect me first? Then I'm not sure that you're where you need to be in terms of looking out for your fellow human beings. And it just goes back to the Pastor Martin Niemöller poem. First they came.
Mm-hmm.
You know, are you willing to step in and step up in these moments? Is probably the most honest assessment you can have for yourself. At work, the work environment where it's right now, it's really tough for a lot of people. Yes, it's much harder for Black women than probably anybody else in the workplace. That's just a fact, that the most educated group in our country has the hardest time maintaining their jobs right now. And it's never been for performance.
Yeah.
Are you willing to step in and say, knowing that they could do this to you and you'd be forced to try and find another job, or you might not get that promotion, or you may not get the thing that you're looking for because you have spoken up?
Can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
So, 2 years ago, my husband and I were in Mexico, and it was our wedding anniversary. We always go to Mexico. And he decided on our wedding anniversary, he wanted to ride a moped because he grew up on a moped. He grew up riding around town on a moped.
Sure.
And I had never ridden a moped. And even though I'm athletic, I'd never been on a moped. And he went so fast, and I was trying to catch him and ended up skidding out on a gravel road in Mexico.
Ooh.
And busting up my knees, and I lost a tooth. And it was bad. It's our wedding anniversary, and I end up in the ER in Mexico, and they totally took care of me. It was really amazing, but they had to dig the gravel out of my knee, and it was kind of an awful way to end our vacation. Well, I had to do a keynote in Ohio 2 days after we got back, and so I had to fly all the way from Seattle to Ohio on a plane. And being on a plane with all that pain is just not fun anyway. The pressure is just not good for it. So don't do that. If you ever fall, don't get on a plane. But I had to fly, and then I had to teach for 7 hours that day in Ohio and then fly back. So I am in a lot of pain. I've been standing all day teaching. I get back to the airport in Columbus, and I am in so much pain. And I have a bandage around both hands because I have cut open both hands, and I have bandages on my knees, and I'm wearing a dress. So you can see the bandages on my knees and my hands. And I go through TSA, and they stop me, and they want to check under the bandages. Mind you, I'm the only Black person anywhere. There is not another Black person, not a staff person, not anybody riding a plane. I am the only Black person in the entire place. And they stop me, and they want to look under my bandages, which hurts, of course.
Yeah.
And I'm tired. Well, now because want to look under my bandages, they decide they also want to look through my bag. So now they're looking through my bags too.
Oh.
My bag beeps when it goes through. And this agent comes over and he says, "Oh, because your bag beeped, we need to do a pat down." And I said, "You just did a pat down. Did you not see? Like, I just was over there. They just looked under me." And he said, "Well, it's our policy. We got to do a pat down when your bag beeps." And I said, "Sir, I think you're not hearing me. I just was pat down. Just ask the other agent." "Well, nope, ma'am. I'm going to get a female agent. She's going to come pat you down." I said, "Can I at least sit down? Because now I'm emotionally a wreck, and I feel like I'm being discriminated against, but I don't have the energy because I've been teaching for 7 hours." And I sit down in this chair, and a white woman had been standing in the Starbucks line right next to TSA. She was just about to order her drink, and she leaves the line. She leaves her space in the line. So she's first out of like 8 people. She leaves the line, and she comes and sits down on the floor. next to my chair. And she looks up at me and she says, "Okay, I've been watching everything that just happened and it's unconscionable. How can I support you? I can go yell at the administrator if you want me to, but I don't want to do anything that you don't want me to do."
Mm,
And I
yeah.
burst into tears. I said, "Can you just hold my hand right now?" That's all. I just actually don't want you to yell at the administrator, because here's what we know as Black women. Once that white lady yells at the administrator, who ends up being targeted? We do.
Yeah.
We end up being
Yeah.
targeted. Do you know this woman? Turns out she was on my flight back to Seattle.
Yeah.
She was in a doctoral program on social justice. And what she knew is white women jump in all the time and speak up for you in ways that are not helpful to you.
Right.
And it was such a power. So there's an accomplice right there. There's an abolitionist right there. There's a
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
physical picture. That woman just showing up and getting on the floor next to me and just, how can I show up for you? And that's my invitation to anyone watching,
Mm,
is look for opportunities to be in service of other people, and then ask people, how can I show up for you? Don't assume that you have all the answers, and understand that when you do stand up really loudly on our behalf, we understand you may have really good intentions, but we end up suffering consequences behind that often. And so ask us, what is it? Hey, Erin, I saw you get spoken over in a staff meeting.
hmm
Is there a way that I can show up for you in the future? Ask us before you go running roughshod over things, because we also end up then suffering the consequences, sometimes of people with really great intention.
Yeah. Yeah. I I think I'm just looking at our time, and I could keep you all day, Erin. I love swapping stories. It's so fun. I want to end on a similar note of hope, where an individual wasn't quite doing their dissertation or anything on social justice, but I was coaching in Indianapolis at a high school with a team that was predominantly Black. We had one white girl on the team. I was a high school girls basketball coach, and head coach for the last couple seasons. Throughout the season, the Black staff would let him know, hey, some of these things that are going on are racist. It's flat out racism. What's going on? Whether it be comments from the stands or something
Yeah.
that the referee is doing. When you get outside of Indianapolis, you're into those rural
Oh,
communities.
yeah. I'm so
And
aware.
yeah, north or south, it just gets a little dicey sometimes for a team that's predominantly
Mm-hmm.
Black. Well, our team had a nationally recognized player. This kid was being recruited by everybody in the country. And so there was some fanfare that came to every girls' basketball game because they wanted to see if their kids could, hold
Yeah.
up against the stud. And so we get in there, we're on the southern Indiana, traveled about an hour to get there, and we already kind of know it's going to be hostile just because. And it starts off on a crazy note. Now, this coach that we had been pouring into, white man who loves the kids, but didn't really want to get involved in all the politics and racism and all that stuff. We had been pouring into him just little ways in which he can earn the trust of his team, earn the trust of his community. And so we get to the school and we do the warm up. The kids are there for an hour and a half before the game, shooting around before all the stuff starts. So we get there, both teams are there, one's on one side, one's on the other. And the home team, these kids from Southern Indiana, put in this mixtape. And it's like a CD. Sorry, kids. Tapes and CDs are these things that actually carried the music.
We're
Yeah,
showing our age here.
showing my age here. We didn't stream our music. So they put this CD in, and the first thing that comes out is this hardcore hip hop, just curse words, B's and F's,
Yeah.
left and right. And the athletic director, after like 5 minutes of these songs just going off and saying whatever, our kids are just shooting, their kids are just shooting, comes over to our kids because we had pulled him over to talk about, hey, let's get focused, yada, yada. Comes over to our huddle, the athletic director. We don't play this kind of music at our school. I can't believe you guys would put this kind of stuff out here. We've got parents and children out here. And our head coach. Now, I didn't have to say anything. None of the other assistants had to say anything. Our white head coach stood up, got face to face with this man in front of a crowd who had started to gather, and told this man, this isn't our music. Your student athletes put on this music. It seems really odd that you would assume that the visiting team would come in, believe that we have the right to put in whatever music we want and start blaring it for the audience. That the assumptions you're making are damaging. Athletic director, all the excuses in the world. I'm so sorry. But that was the first time he stood up for the girls.
Yeah.
And the girls played like just
I'm sure.
absolute studs that night. They just diving for loose balls, taking charge, just going nuts as a team. And later on in the game, this is where it got really controversial. You could hear in the audience a lot of the racial slurs that were being stated. This man takes a timeout, calling the girls monkeys, calling all that.
Yeah, all the things.
The student section, the adults, everybody.
Yeah.
He calls a timeout, goes not out into the middle of the floor, but goes over to the other side. Athletic director sitting right at the scorer's bench and the head coach. He tells the guy to come over, and they come over. Athletic director comes over, and he says, there are two things that are going to happen right now, or we're leaving. Number one, you're going to get rid of this person, this person, and this person. Number two, you're going to make a public statement saying that this doesn't represent your school well.
Yeah.
I will grab my kids right now. We're up by like 17 or 18, so it's nice to do when you're already winning. But I'm going to grab my kids right now, and we're leaving if you do not address this behavior. And so the athletic director pushed back a little bit. The head coach, they're just. He said, okay. And so he told the team we're leaving. We all got our stuff, and we're about to leave. And the athletic director, hold on. He understood his power in that moment.
Yeah.
And stood up for those girls. And all the black parents who were sitting in the audience who knew what they were going to get when they arrived in that arena, imagine the shoulders that came down. The hearts that stopped beating so fast because they wanted to punch the person talking about their kid. Yeah. You understand? Your power in a moment doesn't come from you being the CEO or the head of the school or whatever your position is. It comes in the form of you being a person willing to put yourself on the line. Step out of your comfort zone and say, no, it's enough.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a big show. And here's the other thing to that story. I bet those kids still remember that story. Yeah. I'm sure all these years later they remember that story. So do the parents. And we also remember the many stories where no one stood up for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So you get to choose, you viewer, get to choose how you will be remembered.
Yeah.
And understand that we remember when you don't speak up. We remember the 15 times that you don't speak up. And that's not an excuse to, you can change. We also see that too. We see when you change. But understand those choices to stand up or not are sealed in our minds, because we also have to decide then, are you someone that I can trust? And I can't trust you if I'm in a space constantly being stepped on and you have said nothing. You now become as dangerous as that boss. You become as dangerous as the person who's always calling me the N-word or saying I'm not qualified. You, silent one, are actually really dangerous too. Yeah. So know that kids are watching, people are watching, and your little act, your little message in a staff meeting, hey, you know what? I heard
Mm-hmm.
Erin say that earlier. How come now Susie's getting credit for that thing? I heard Erin say it earlier,
Mm,
right?
yes.
Those little
Yes.
interruptions, those little opportunities mean so very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be a big show.
I agree wholeheartedly. I'm gonna go super nerd here, folks. Just as we're closing up here, I think about it, and I've seen it happen in real life, where that one person steps up. They see the moment, they step into the moment, but they don't just step in and just kind of look around. Like they step up and they say the hard thing, right? I've seen that impact others where they feel liberated now to,
Yeah.
you know what, I've not felt good about hearing this at work or at church or in the game or whatever, and I'm going to step into it too.
Yeah.
And there's this moment in one of my favorite movies. On the other side of this desk, guys, you can't see it, are a bunch of superheroes and Funko Pop and posters and movies. One of my favorite scenes in the movies is in Avengers Endgame when Captain America's all by himself, and all of a sudden you hear Sam Wilson speak to him, and he says, "Hey, Cap, on your left." And then all these people come to help him.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this super emotional scene. You get chills when you see it. I've felt that when people have stood up for me at work, when people have stood up for me in community engagements and different areas. And you don't have to be Captain America,
Mm-hmm.
but you can be that person who says, "Hey, on your left, I've
Yeah.
got you.
Yeah.
I know this isn't right."
Yeah.
Marvel, you can pay me for that little plug there later. Erin,
I love that.
this has been amazing as always. Folks,
Thank you.
if you don't know, she is very prolific on TikTok. She's got YouTube videos out there. She's got TED Talks. Erin Jones, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for the time, my friend.
Thank you. I needed this today. So this is such a great way to start the day.
Yeah. The Unbroken Place podcast is presented by Elevate One Consulting. The show is produced by Say Something Studios. Learn more about both of these in the show notes. The show's music is performed by Kesta, Anthem of Rain, and Holzna Raps. Thank you for being a part of the Unbroken Place community. Look for an ongoing conversation on TikTok, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also find some helpful resources at eddiepaulthomas.com. And make sure to sign up for our newsletter called OK on Second Thought on LinkedIn. Until next time, one love. Say Something Studios.